أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر ولله الحمد الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن أمير المؤمنين وإمام المتقين عليا ولي الله أشهد أن أمير المؤمنين وإمام المتقين عليا حجة الله هيا على الصلاح هيا على الصلاح هيا على الفلاح هيا على الفلاح هيا على خير العمل هيا على خير العمل الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. تبارك الذي بيده الملك وهو على كل شيء قدير. كل شيء قدير الذي خلق الموت والحياة ليبلوكم أيكم أحسن عملا وهو العزيز الغفور. الذي خلق 7 سماوات طباقا ما ترى في خلق الرحمن من تفاوت فارجع البصر هل ترى من فتور ثم ارجع البصر كرتين ينقلب إليك البصر خاسئا وهو حسير. ولقد زينا السماء الدنيا بمصابيح وجعلناها رجوما للشياطين واعتدنا لهم عذاب السعير. وللذين كفروا بربهم عذاب جهنم وبئس المصير. إذا ألقوا فيها سمعوا لها شهيقا وهي تفور تكاد تميز من الغيظ كلما ألقي فيها فوج سألهم خزنتها ألم يأتكم نذير قالوا بلى قد جاءنا نذير فكذبنا وقلنا ما نزل الله من شيء إن أنتم إلا في ضلال كبير. وقالوا لو كنا نسمع أو نعقل ما كنا في أصحاب السعير فاعترفوا بذنبهم فسحقا لأصحاب السعير. إن الذين يخشون ربهم بالغيب لهم مغفرة وأجر كبير. وأسروا قولكم أو اجهروا به إنه عليم بذات الصدور. ألا يعلم من خلق وهو اللطيف الخبير. هو الذي جعل لكم الأرض ذلولا فامشوا في مناكبها وكلوا من رزقه وإليه النشور. أأمنتم في السماء يخسف بكم الأرض فإذا هي تمور أم أمنتم من في السماء يرسل عليكم حاصبا فستعلمون كيف نذير. ولقد كذب الذين من قبلهم فكيف كان نكير. أولم يروا إلى الطير فوقهم صافات ويقبضن ما يمسكهن إلا الرحمن إنه بكل شيء بصير. أمن هذا الذي هو جند لكم ينصركم من دون الرحمن إن الكافرون إلا في غرور. أمن هذا الذي يرزقكم إن أمسك رزقا بل لجوا في عتو ونفور. أفمن يمشي مكبا على وجهه أهدى أمن يمشي سويا على صراط مستقيم. قل هو الذي أنشأكم وجعل لكم السمع والأبصار والأفئدة قليلا ما تشكرون قل هو الذي ذرأكم في الأرض وإليه تحشرون ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين قل إنما العلم عند الله وإنما أنا نذير مبين فلما رأوه زلفة سيئت وجوه الذين كفروا وقيل هذا الذي كنتم به تدعون قل أرأيتم إن أهلكني الله ومن معي أو رحمنا فمن يجير الكافرين من عذاب أليم قل هو الرحمن آمنا به وعليه توكلنا فستعلمون من هو في ضلال مبين قل أرأيتم إن أصبح ماؤكم غورا فمن يأتيكم بماء معين صدق الله العلي العظيم صلوات رحم الله من قرأ سورة الفاتحة
محمد وآل محمد صلوات ऐसा लुटा फिर ना बसा जहरा कर ऐ करबो भला ऐसा लुटा फिर ना बसा जहरा कर ऐ करबो भला देख कर जिसे मेरे तक छुपे देख कर जिसे मेरे तक छुपे बेरिदा करे ऐ फलक उसे रूह मुस्तफ़ा जान मुर्तज़ा रूह मुस्तफ़ा जान मुर्तज़ा जहरा का घर ऐ करबो भला ऐसा लूटा फिर ना बसा जहरा का घर ऐ करबो भला गर्दे गम से मुँह सब अटा हुआ कर दे गम से मुँह सब अटा हुआ देख भाई का सर कटा हुआ शेर शाम में होके बेरिदा शेर शाम में होके बेरिदा जहरा का घर ऐ करबो भला ऐसा लूटा फिर ना बसा जहरा का घर ऐ करबो भला सर पे शे नहीं मुज्तबा नहीं सर पे शे नहीं मुज्तबा नहीं मुर्तज़ा नहीं मुस्तफ़ा नहीं होके बेनवा क्यों न फिर भला होके बेनवा क्यों न फिर भला जहरा का घर ऐ करबो भला ऐसा लूटा फिर ना बसा जहरा का घर ऐ करबो भला जलजले में हो क्यों न नई नवा जलजले में हो क्यों न नई नवा क्यों न फिर हिले دشت کربلا ہائے فوج کی چھین لے ردا ہائے فوج کی چھین لے ردا زہرا کا گھر اے کرب و بلا ایسا لوٹا پھر نہ بسا زہرا کا گھر اے کرب و بلا دم چھٹا ہوا دل ردا ہوا دم چھٹا ہوا دل ردا ہوا گھر لٹا ہوا سر کھلا ہوا چہرے پہ ملے کاغ کربلا چہرے پہ ملے کاغ کربلا زہرا کا گھر اے کرب و بلا ایسا لوٹا پھر نہ بسا زہرا کا گھر اے کرب و بلا الفاتحہ مع صلوات
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Sayyid Hasan Rizvi, respected elders, brothers, sisters in Iman, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Surah Fatiha is requested for all the names listed on the screen and Kul Arwahil Mu'mineen wal Mu'minat, Sawab al-Fatiha. Ayat-e-Ma Yujibun is requested for all the names listed on the screen and whoever is in need of it here and elsewhere. Let us all recite it together. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Amma yujibul mustarra idha da'ahu wa yakshifu as-su'. Amma yujibul mustarra idha da'ahu wa yakshifu as-su'. أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. Now let us invite Sayyid to come forward to recite tonight's madlis. Par Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad salawat.
رحم الله من قرأ الفاتحة بعد الصلوات. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وبه نستعين لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على الأشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين شفيع المذنبين رحمة للعالمين سيدنا والنبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وشفيع نفوسنا وطبيب ذنوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. ثم الصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين المنتجبين المكرمين الخيرين الفاضلين السيدين الصادقين لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين روحي وأرواح العالمين لتراب مقدمه الفدا ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Mu'mineen, mu'minat, brothers and sisters in Islam and Iman, Salamun alaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. In Islamic history, on the 9th of Dhul Hijjah, which is Yawm al-Arafah. This is a time during Hajj season, normally, in this place in Arafah, where Muslims have all gathered, right? And there's specific rites and responsibilities that need to be performed then. One day in Islamic history, on 9th of Dhul Hijjah, Muslims from all over the globe had gathered there, from as far as Khurasan in Iran, from parts of Africa, from the farthest stretches of the Islamic empire. And they had gathered there, and while they were there, on this day of Arafah, somebody stepped up, realized that this was a time where a message could be given, and everyone, all the Muslims would hear it. So someone stood up, and of course this person was our sixth holy Imam, Imam Jaffer ibn Muhammad, As-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. In the middle of all these Muslims, he stood up and he gave a short but powerful speech. And the narrator who's narrating this event for us, he says that the Imam recited it in a way where normally nobody would recite their khutbahs or their short speeches like. He said when the Imam stood and faced all of these different Muslims, he raised his voice louder than I've heard him raise his voice before. And he repeated his statement 3 times. After he did this, the Imam turned to his right and repeated the same statement loudly again 3 times. Then he turned behind him, again repeated the same statement 3 times, and then turned to his left finally, once again repeating his statement loudly 3 times. These same short lines amongst all these Muslims gathered on Yawm al-Arafah. 12 times the Imam is reciting this loudly. What did the Imam say? The Imam begins by saying, Ayyuhan nas, O people, Inna Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajil farjahum. Kana al-Imam. That Rasulullah was the Imam. It's an interesting way to start the speech. Then he continues. Thumma kana Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu wassalam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajil farjahum. Then the Imam after him was Ali ibn Abi Talib. Then he says, Thumma al-Hasan. Then after him is Hasan, the Imam after him. Thumma al-Hussein. After him is Hussein. Thumma Ali ibn Hussein. Thumma Muhammad ibn Ali. He goes through each and every single one of these Imams. And then, when it should stop at himself, he remains silent and does ishara. This is not normally a narration that we hear when it comes to hearing about the history and the personality and the teachings of the 6th Imam. The picture that we normally have in mind of the socio-political environment that the Imam was dealing with, we wouldn't expect the Imam to go up there and start talking about the concept of him being the Imam, the current Imam, the rightful Imam on earth. But according to this historical narration, he went there in Hajj, in front of all the Muslims, while they're all gathered around on Yawm al-Arafah, and he is basically announcing his Imam in front of everyone. We don't normally see this among other Imams. They may do it in secret, or they may do it maybe during Hajj, but amongst just the Shi'as. But in front of all of the Muslims, and again, for this to be recited during the time of the 6th Imam, I mean, the first time I came across this, it seemed a little strange to me. Why would the 6th Imam do this? How could the 6th Imam have done something like this? So this is should be surprising, I think, and shocking to most of us. What exactly was going on here? How is the Imam able to say something like this out in the open? I mean, some of us, I think, we know the conditions that the Imam had to deal with during his time. How could he have announced his imama and his wilaya in an open gathering like this? More importantly, why did he say it? Why would he wait until this time to say something like this? More importantly after that, or another question that comes to our mind, why didn't anything happen after that? If he's in front of all the Muslims and he announces his imama, our expectation would be The reason he'd want to announce it is so that people follow him and he begins to, become the rightful Khalifa and the Imam. But as we know from history, it didn't happen. So why would he waste his time? Why would he bother? Was there something that caused him to say these words during Hajj? And finally, after we've tried to answer and give some possible answers to these questions, how do these answers possibly relate to us and give us information and help us understand what we can do right now to prepare for the arrival, the zuhur of our 12th Imam, Imam al-Mahdi, Ajjalallahu ta'ala, farajuhu sharif. First, why is it that we are shocked and surprised at hearing something like this? Why does this feel abnormal for the Imam to say? And we can maybe imagine the first Imam saying this, maybe even Imam Hasan or Imam Hussein. We can imagine them. But normally this talk about wilayah and imamah, we don't hear from the later Imams. The middle and later Imams, we don't, that's not normally discussed. We don't expect that from them. So let's go to this normal misconception that I think a lot of us have. The normal understanding of the socio-political environment of the Imam's life during that time. So most of us know that, okay, during that time, there was this fight going on between the Umayyads and the Abbasids, right? The Umayyads were, this was their end period basically. They were on their way out. And the Abbasids were making their way in. So according to some historians, the sixth Imam lived through about the last 5 of the Umayyads and then 2 of the Abbasids that first started. So normally when people talk about this, their main focus is that, look, because of the upheaval, because of the rivalry, because of what was going on, the interfighting between these 2 empires, or these 2, these families basically, this gave the chance for the 6th Imam to come and now teach the masses. This is what we normally think about when it comes to the 6th Imam. He was the educator, right? He started this education system because these Umayyads and Abbasids were too busy fighting amongst themselves, so they weren't worried about what the Imam was teaching. This is what we normally hear. And yes, it is true, the Imam was teaching things. He was going around and educating the masses. He had thousands and thousands of students, most of whom, according to accounts, wouldn't be people that we would call Shias necessarily. And whether we would call them Sunnis or not, that's a different debate, right? The idea of Sunni Shia didn't really exist back then, as we understand it. But as far as close followers of the Ahlul Bayt, no. Most of his students weren't like that. We also hear the idea that the Imam and his followers and his Shias were practicing taqiyya because of the environment that was there. So for example, one of his narrations that's attributed to him is where he says, "At-taqiyya tursul mu'min." Taqiyya is the shield of a mu'min. So a lot of ulama, they comment on narrations like this, that during that time, because of the environment, because of the infighting, because of what was happening, it was absolutely necessary that the true followers, the true Shias of the Imam, and many of the other Imams, had to practice taqiyya and keep certain things to themselves. So this kind of makes us, think like, okay, if it was so open, if the environment was set so that he could teach everybody, then why would he also have to practice taqiyya? Now, shouldn't he be open and be able to teach whatever he wants? So sometimes these little details about how the Imam taught, why he taught, when he taught, what groups did he talk about, and all the other little details about the environment are not really mentioned. And they're very, very important. Because we really need to understand that it wasn't just this one big open environment and the Imam was just free, and he could do whatever he wants. It was not like that at all. In fact, our ulama normally, they break it down into 2 specific eras that the Imam lived in. The first stage was the end of the Umayyads, and the second stage was the reign of the Abbasids. And they say that when you look at both of these different eras, you see that the Imam's tactics, his functions, his responsibilities, and the way that he spoke to the masses and the way that he spoke to the Shia specifically changed. And again, normally we don't hear this sort of difference. So I wanted to bring this out for us, inshallah, tonight, if you can recite a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. The way that this history is described to us is that, again, everything's out in the open, and it's almost as if it seems as it was mostly during the time of the Abbasids. Generally speaking, it seems to be more time during the Umayyads, but again, there's a difference of opinion about the age and how long it lived. I mean, he was about 34 years he lived as an Imam, right? So we have to understand one thing. During both of these eras, the Umayyad era and the Abbasid era, persecution took place. The Imam was persecuted during both of their times. He wasn't free as we all think he was. He wasn't just able to go out in the open. Was he freer than others? Maybe. But was he still persecuted? Absolutely. Did he suffer house arrest? Yes. He was house arrested by both of them. Was he taunted and harassed constantly? Yes, by both Umayyads and Abbasids. The Shias were also harassed as well. You know, when the Umayyads or Abbasids would find out these are supporters of Jaffer ibn Muhammad, As-Sadiq, then they would go and torture them. They would imprison them. They would harass them. They would take their money. You know, all the things that we normally associate with the normal Umayyads, but we don't associate it with the Shias of the sixth Imam. But the same things happened. In fact, the spies of both of those empires existed too. The Umayyads would still have their spies amongst the Shias of the Imam, and the Abbasids had their spies there too. Which is why now it makes sense why the Imam had to tell his mu'mineen, you have to practice taqiyya. You have to be careful because there's people here who are not here for our best interest. They're here to cause fitnas. They're here to find out our secrets. So we have to be wise, we have to be careful. As we talked about on Thursday, a true Shia, a true mu'min does not reveal all of our secrets. This we hear from the later, the middle and later Imams. We don't just go out and give out all of our information. The real nature of imamah and wilayah is not something that's meant for everybody. Not everybody can handle it. We know the famous narrations that even Abu Dhar could not have handled the station and maqam that Salman held. So even among Shias, there were different levels. So among the mu'mineen, during the time of these imams, because of the socio-political environment, they were advised and ordered and told by their imams, you need to use taqiyya as a shield. Protect yourselves and protect the concept of imamah and wilayah. You have to be very, very careful here. So again, let's keep in mind what the socio-political environment is. It's not this free, open university that people keep talking about. No, they were being persecuted. The imam couldn't talk about anything. As an example, when he would send out some of his representatives, his own students, to go and teach others, during this time, he would have to tell them, look, because of the way things are going, when people ask you religious questions, give them the fatwas and fatawa of the Ahl Sunnah. Meaning the Amma, he would call them, right? Because there's no Ahl Sunnah like that, but the Amma, the general population. Don't give them our fatawa because you don't know who you're talking to. And they could use this against you. So even when it came to legal fiqh issues, they had to be very, very careful. And we see this in riwayat as well. When people would come and ask the sixth Imam, he would give fatawa. He'd say that this scholar from Kufa says this. This scholar from Basra says this. This scholar from Medina says this. He would give all the differences of opinion. And then sometimes he may give his own opinion, sometimes he wouldn't, depending on who he saw who was there. And sometimes the companions who didn't know any better, they would say in the gathering, oh, where's your opinion though? And then people afterwards have to tell them, quiet, don't say this stuff out loud. And they would condemn that person, insult and say, look, you're obviously not one of us because you would know that, our Imam, our Mawla is not going to reveal these things in these public gatherings. Once the spies and the fitna mongers leave, and we have our private gathering, that's when we can start talking about the details about the Shia madhab, right? The Ja'fari fiqh as it came to be known. Now what's interesting is this. More of the Imam's freedom was not during the time of the Abbasids. More of that freedom actually existed while the Umayyad Empire was ending. Now why is that the case? Why is it that the Imam was freer, more free, during the time of the Umayyads and not the Abbasids? Why is that the case? There seems to be, according to our ulama and historians, one specific thing, one concept that the Imam had implemented during his time that lasted all the way up until the time of the 12th Imam. And that system was possibly the one that allowed him that freedom and perhaps was also the reason why he was able to say what he said on Yawm al-Arafah during this one day in Hajj. And let's share that system if you can recite a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. We've talked about this system before as well. This system that the sixth Imam, according to our ulama, he was the first one to implement and start this and to structure it and to strengthen it, was what we call the wakala system or wikala system. Having a wakil, having a representative. Building a network of individuals to pass and fulfill different functions that the Imam couldn't physically fill wherever he went because he couldn't travel for various reasons that we just mentioned. House arrest, persecution, spying, etc. This wikala system of the Imam appointing individuals, sending them in different provinces and areas, and then fulfilling the functions of wilayah and imamah, kept that system of wilayah and imamah strong everywhere. So what were some of the functions? One main one, it was the legal duties. The Imam would train his students. He would train fuqaha, mujtahideen. Right? This the concept of taqlid. They say, it starts around this era. It strengthens then. Now people always ask, where's the concept of taqlid and marja'iyah? It's not in history, it doesn't exist then. It's clearly there in our riwayat. It's clearly there in history. The Imams trained individuals and they told them, go out into your areas, and when people ask you questions, tell them they don't have to write letters to me. They don't have to come all the way from their province to me. They can ask you because I certify what you say. Your opinions are my opinions. And this is what the Imam would do. Even when people would write directly to the Imam, he would say, look, I'll give you the answer, but Fulan ibn Fulan is in Medina. Fulan ibn Fulan is in Basra, is in Kufa. You can ask him the questions and I certify whatever he says. So one of the first major functions of the Wikala system, of the Imam's representatives, was to fulfill the legal duties. People had questions and they needed answers according to the Shia Ja'fari madhab, and they would provide that for them. So this was one duty. Another duty was that they were managing the affairs of the Shias. Obviously, during that time, if you were to go to court, let's say you had a dispute with somebody else. If it was two Shias who had a dispute, which sort of system would they use? They would use the sort of Ahlul Sunnah, Umayyad or Abbasid fiqh. They wouldn't use Ja'fari fiqh. So two Shias wouldn't really be able to go to court and get their differences or situations settled. So in order to get their affairs managed, they would go to this wakil, this person that was sent as a representative of the Imam. They would go and the Imam would manage everything. Anybody who followed the system, was a follower of the wilaya of the Ahlul Bayt, they would go to the representative of the Imam and they would manage and settle all of those affairs. And the third function was regarding finances and economics. All of this, the khums, zakat, all of this Baytul Mal, all of this stuff was collected by these representatives and either sent back to the Imam, wherever he was, for example in Medina, or the Imam would tell them that so-and-so amount used for this, so-and-so amount due for this. So the financial economic system was also set up at that point as well. Because they knew that obviously they couldn't pay their zakat or their khums to these, zalimeen, right? This illegitimate system that was there from the Umayyads and the Abbasids. So this system of having representatives directly connected to the Imam was set up right there. In terms of the legal function, in terms of managing the affairs of the Shias, and collecting and dispersing money, the economic functions. These three things were there. Now, we take this idea and we can possibly understand why is it that the Imam, on Yawm al-Arafah, during the end of the Umayyad era, why he was able to go out in the open and tell people that he was the Imam of the time, that Khilafah belonged to him and not to the Umayyads, not to anybody else. Why was he able to do that? Because of this network connection system, the Wakala system that he had developed. You see, many of us don't understand that. We think that just having this belief system and following the Ahlul Bayt is enough. I'm ready to die for my Imam. Yeah, that sounds nice on paper. You're willing to do it. You have this love in your heart. Okay, that's great. What the Imam established was this strong network of Shias, and they existed in every single province, such to the extent that they all showed up for Hajj. They were all present there. So the general masses that he's talking to, it was only a small amount of them that were actually people who didn't understand the wilaya system. A good amount of those individuals were followers of the sixth Imam. A good amount of them had understood because of the managing of the affairs that their representatives had gone through. So now when the Imam sees that all these muqaddamat, all the preliminaries, the conditions, all of these things have been met, the wakil system, the wikala system is there, my networks are there, so if I give an order, a legal order, a management order, a financial order, if I say something, then the system will follow through with it. Since that hierarchy is there, now is the time at Hajj, when everybody's here, I can announce myself as the Imam. And when I do this, then people will follow through. So this is where the Imam, seeing that the foundations, the grounds, the base, the bunyad, they have been set up, now we can take it to the next step and establish the system of wilaya. But here's the problem. Well, why didn't that get established then? If the network was there, the wikala system was there, people were following the fiqh rulings, they were giving him money, they were following the orders, everything was being managed, then why is it that after he announces himself in public as the Imam, why then did people, why did nothing happen? Why wasn't there a revolution, an inqilab, a change? Why didn't anything switch and turn in favor of the sixth Imam becoming the next Khalifa. So let's discuss that, inshallah, as our last question. If you can, salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So again, the Imam develops this wikala system, which existed and was strengthened all the way up until, as we said, the time of the 12th Imam. Legal issues, managing affairs of the Shias, and financial collection and disbursement. All of this was there. If you remember, we said that all of this was happening at the end as the Umayyads were on their way out. So people were already fed up with what was going on. Their hearts were basically with somebody who was ready to rise up. They recognized that after Karbala, the Umayyads, were illegitimate rulers. They saw what Yazid and his followers had done. So they said, okay, now we're ready. Again, from that point, as we see from the time of the 4th Imam and 5th Imam, they began to develop the system, but it wasn't strong yet. The 6th Imam strengthens that system, and really it grows and it strengthens, and it's in almost every single province now. Those individuals all show up at Hajj. The Imam announces. So again, why no follow-through? This is now when the Abbasids enter the arena. The Abbasids, when they see that, look, there's a political vacuum, a socio-political, theological vacuum being made here. The people want leadership. They don't want the Umayyads, they want something else. And it's clear now that we see, the Umayyads are, the Abbasids, they see that, look, the people's hearts are softened towards the family of the Prophet, right? The Ahlul Bayt. Well, guess what? We are Banu Abbas, right? We are from the family of the Prophet too. We can use this opportunity to fool the simple-minded individuals, even the simple-minded Shias, use some, ridiculous argument, convince them that we are actually the rightful inheritors, we are the family of the Prophet, and then we'll be able to secure power. So the same sort of arguments that people generally had in their minds that they heard from before, that they were being taught by, let's say, all of the Imams leading up to that time. All of that build-up that happened post-Karbala, it was all there. It was ripe. But people's simple-minded nature was still there. Their ability to not really think through things was still there. Their lack of education in basic aqidah and aqaid was still there. And this became their downfall. This is what led to them switching over from following our 6th Imam towards the camp of the Abbasids. And unfortunately, we still have that sort of simple-mindedness today. We know that we have a strong system of aqidah, of philosophy, of metaphysics, of fiqh, and all of this is there. But individuals with very, very simplistic arguments, very foolish arguments, terrible arguments, will come and they'll try to convince others, and unfortunately they end up convincing individuals of ridiculous notions sometimes. Again, we're not judging their niyyah. Maybe they're doing it because they believe that they're on haqq, maybe. But unfortunately, it's people who haven't studied properly, who maybe they hear 1 or 2 lectures or they read 1 or 2 books in their own language, and then they feel that they have a good understanding of Islamic sciences. And from there, they go and they say some ridiculous notions. And I'll give you some just personal examples that I've seen. I've gotten to a lot of discussions, debates, which end up turning into heated arguments, with people from with all different ideas. So I remember, and this happens constantly, right? So some people, they come up to me and they say, look, this system of hierarchy or leadership, it doesn't exist in Islam. That's what they tell me. We don't have this system of clergy. It doesn't exist there. Right? You sit and they talk about, look at the downfall of the Catholics, how that's failed them. We need to have this sort of reformation, movement in Islam, get rid of the clergy and these ulama, like this stuff is not working out. All of us, we can all read Quran. We can, all understand the narrations. We can all figure this stuff out. And in fact, what we need is to have a shura. We need to have a council amongst all of us, right? We need to have this, this council, a body, a committee, democracy. That's the system that we need, and that's what we should have. And I've heard many people, bring this sort of argument up, academics or lay individuals from communities. So, I'll say, okay, let's hear your argument. What's your evidence for this? Because you're saying that you can get this from the Quran. Well, give me your argument. Where is this in the Quran? They say, Surah Ash-Shura, the chapter of counsel or advisement. It's Surah Ash-Shura. You're giving me the name of a chapter of the Quran. You're giving me the name of the surah and saying that's your proof where we have to have councils in Islam. That's your proof? Like, yeah. I said, okay, fine. Said, sure. So then you also must believe that elephants are halal. Like, what? No. Like, yeah, elephants must be halal. Why? Surah Al-Fil. I can give you the name of a chapter in the Quran as well. That doesn't make it halal. What kind of ridiculous argument is that? You see, some people, they are unable to really think through the arguments in depth. They come up with very simple-minded things, and for a lot of us, if we don't know how to parse through arguments, then it could sound nice. Again, I don't want to give specifics, but we have all heard various different styles of arguments. The thing is, in the Hawzawi tradition, what we are able to do, what a proper talibul ilm, a student of the Hawza, a proper alim is able to do, is look at all the various different opinions that exist, find all of the strengths and all of the weaknesses, and be able to say, look, this one is weak because of this is weak because of this, but these are strong because of this, and in my humble opinion, wallahu a'lam, Allah knows best, this is what I understand from this. This is how our mujtahideen speak with one another. This is how they write their books. What we see right now among these speakers that are out there trying to offer their true version of Islam, do we actually hear them give all the different sides of an argument? Or do they completely just shut down one side and say, look, this is real haqq, everything else is kufr, or it's ghulu, or it's extremism, and we need to do this. A real student of knowledge doesn't just strawman somebody's position. They don't just weaken somebody's argument, they should actually strengthen their argument. They should say, look, the orthodox, conservative, traditional opinion, this is the strength in it. This is why it's actually sound, but here's some of the weaknesses. The progressive, liberal arguments, here are the strengths, but here are the weaknesses, and for this reason, this is why I might prefer the progressive argument or liberal argument, or for this reason, this is why we may prefer the orthodox or traditional argument. But even with all of that there, even if somebody's able to do that, if people are not actually trained in these sciences, how are they going to know if somebody knows what they're talking about? All of these concepts are something that somebody in the Hawza would study, right? You study basic logic, you study fiqh, usul al-fiqh, you study all of the sciences. A general lay individual, how would they know any of these things? Again, a simple example right now, when people talk about the efficacy of face masks, or they talk about whether a vaccine should be taken or not, you hear everybody automatically becomes a medical expert all of a sudden, right? That they're able to research, they watch 1 or 2 YouTube videos, or they look at 1 or 2 articles, and they say, look at this article, it says that there is no transmission here, or this this article says that because of vaccines that it'll destroy, it'll cause a hormonal imbalance. Now again, I'm not saying that those are incorrect or correct. I'm giving an example that sometimes people who are not trained on how to read this type of specific literature, which is meant for people who are trained there, they try to read it, they usually make very simplistic mistakes, and then they go and they end up confusing everybody else. This is what happens to individuals who are not trained, and sometimes even those who are trained. Not everybody who goes to the Hawza or who goes to a university is actually good at what they do. I mean, somebody can go to medical school and be a D student and still get a medical license, right? They can still practice, can't they? Even past presidents, they have gone to Ivy League universities, but they've passed because of, the money they probably toss it there, right? So they're C-level students or D-level students. That doesn't tell you whether somebody's actually apt. They have the power and the intellectual prowess to engage in what they're doing. To be able to know whether somebody is strong in a science or not, you would have to have the khibra, people who know that science. And that's exactly why when it comes to the topic of taqleed, or aqaid, or philosophy, or any of these sciences, that's why ulama say, look, you and I, what we need to do is find out who is actually strong in these sciences, and let's see what they have to say. Why do you and I get to make these decisions? We don't do it in any other discipline. We don't do it when it comes to medicine, or we shouldn't do it when it comes to medicine. We don't do it when it comes to mechanics. We don't decide when a car is broken, when it's not. We take it to a mechanic. In any other sphere of life, we go to an expert and we say, look, you guys argue, you figure it out, and you give us your conclusion. And if you say we can pick any of them, fine, we'll pick anything. Why is it that all of a sudden now you and I jump into Islamic sciences and think that we know better? Why is it that you and I think that we can tell what is right and what is wrong? It's this same attitude which led people away from the Imams, especially the 6th Imam, over and over again. These simple-minded Muslims, especially even Shias, were tricked by the simplistic arguments of the Abbasids. And this is something why perhaps this can connect us to what we need to do now in order to prepare and get ourselves ready for the arrival of our 12th Imam, Ajjalallahu Ta'ala Faraju Sharif. Salawat. So this whole momentum that the 6th Imam built up was destroyed because of the Abbasids and their sort of propaganda mission. So now, of course, because of that, the Imam was forced to retreat. He was out there, right? He announced, okay, the system is ready. I've made the wikala system. The people are there. They're ready to follow. I announced my imama, my wilaya. Now I should get the following. But the Abbasids seized the opportunity, and now it gets broken. So the Imam retreats. He says, you know what? People don't get it yet. Now I have to retreat and I have to re-educate everybody now. I have to start almost from scratch. So we shouldn't see the Imam's education as a positive thing necessarily. Yeah, it's good that he was able to do that. But at the same time, if they had listened to the Imam in the first place, if they actually had followed through on their education that they were given, then they wouldn't have fallen through in this. And the sixth Imam would have been the Khalifa, the Imam of that time, and we would have been in a different situation altogether. But unfortunately, history had something else to say, and the Muslims decided something different. Perhaps, maybe this is why we see from the Imams of that era, especially from the sixth Imam, we have this very famous narration, where he is attributed to have said, Intidharul faraj afdalul ibadah. That this intidhar, this active waiting for the Imam, is the greatest ibadah you can perform. Now, when we keep all these other principles that we discussed in line, then maybe we can understand exactly what we have to do. So then how do we get ready? What are the specific actions then you and I need to take? Inshallah, we're going to continue with that as we had mentioned on Thursday night. We're going to continue on Thursday night with our topic and talk about one of the major, most important points that you and I need to work on. Making du'as, wonderful. Praying for one another, great. Reciting dua faraj, yes, keep doing that. Connecting with the Imam, learning the history, beautiful. But perhaps what we really need to focus on is taking the exact example of what the Imam himself had done. What did he do? He built the wikala system and strengthened that wikala system. So perhaps what we need to do then as part of the intidhar is figure out how do we now rebuild that wikala system, strengthen it so that once it's there, the Imam can just reappear and say the system is there, now I can just give the orders. So what does that entail? Inshallah, we'll open this topic up and continue it on Thursday night, inshallah. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. In addition to the legal conversations and orders, in addition to the ways that the Imam was teaching his Shias in terms of morality and ethics, in addition to Imam Sadiq alayhi salam's ability to reach across what we call sectarian lines and attract people and get them to critically think about their lives, connect them with the Quran, right? And all these different things. One of the other main focuses about the Imam's life and what he encouraged to all Muslims at that time was having a connection to his grandfather, Imam Hussein. They say that he had a very special attachment to both Imam Hussein and to Bibi Fatima. We know in narrations, they say that he made it a point that every single Ashura, every single 10th of Muharram, he would make sure to have a gathering. He would invite orators and speakers, poets, to come and recite and recount the tale of what happened. I've heard some historians narrate this, some ulama narrate this, that people would come to the Imam and say, look, we don't understand. We get it. We know Karbala happened, it was a bad thing, Yazid's bad, we got it. Why is it that every single year, the same day, why do you have to keep reminding us of that? We know it. We're trying to move away. We're trying to do something different now. We're trying to improve. What's the point of reminding us every single year? Why do that? And according to this, I haven't seen the narration myself, but according to what the ulama, they say, that the Imam, how he replies, he says, the reason that we have to keep reminding you Muslimin about the event of Karbala year after year after year is the same reason why we have to remind you about Ghadir year after year after year. In the same way that you had believed in Ghadir, you then forgot about it and didn't act upon it. In the same way, in Karbala, you remember it, but then you don't act upon it. So we must keep reminding you over and over again so that you can remember it in your hearts and then hopefully it turns into action. In every single step of the Imam's life, the memory of Imam Hussein, Sayyidah Fatima, the Shahadat, the family never left his heart. And we said that even in the Imam's life, Imam Sadiq's life, he still felt that persecution, that harassment. He still had to deal with a lot of difficulty in his life from both the Umayyads and the Abbasids. Of course, during his life, it became so bad that Mansur al-Mal'un had ordered the Imam to be assassinated. But even before the order of assassination, time after time, order after order, the Imam would be pushed around, he'd be harassed by soldiers. And the way that the Imam would be speaking and encouraging the Muslims to change, it got so bad, and Mansur, this Abbasid Khalifa, this Zalim, was so annoyed once by what the Imam was doing, he ordered his followers, his soldiers, Mansur did, he ordered the house of the Imam to be burned down with everybody inside. His soldiers then came to the house of the Imam. They set it ablaze. Alhamdulillah, through the protection of Allah, the Imam was able to take his family, his servants, everybody outside. Outside they sit and they watch as their house gets burnt. So as people are going around, the family is going around, they're checking up on one another, the kids, the women, the servants, everybody's safe. So everybody in a sense has this sigh of relief that alhamdulillah we're alive, alhamdulillah we're okay. When one of the servants, they look towards our Imam, they look towards Imam As-Sadiq, but then they see him sobbing, they see him crying uncontrollably. So the Khadim comes to him and says, Ya Ibn Rasulullah, why are you crying like this? You can't be a person who's Ahl Dunya, you're not a worldly person, so I know that you can't be crying because you lost your material wealth. It can't be the case. He said, I know that you love your family, of course, but Allah's kept them safe. So why would you be crying? I don't understand. So Imam Sadiq gives him this heart-wrenching reply. He says, I cry because as I look at our house burning down, my mind, my heart immediately jumps to how my grandfather, Hussein, the tents of his family were burnt down in front of them. My mind races to the fact that our mother, Zainab, had to pull Sajjad out of the burning tents. My mind races to the fact that my family is sitting here safe and in comfort. But when I think back, I think of Sakina, the earrings being ripped from her ears, blood trickling down. I think about how my children are safe right now. I can protect them. But then I remember how Hussein, how Abbas, how Zainab couldn't protect Sakina from the slaps of Shimr. I remember how our mother Fatima would be weeping and crying, looking at this scene. So how can I remain tranquil and calm when I see something like this? ألا لعنة الله على قوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون رضا بقضائه وتسليما لأمره صلوات على محمد وعلى محمد.
Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein,
Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein. मोहम्मद के घराने से वफादारी करेंगे हम, अज़ा खाने सजाएंगे, अज़ादारी करेंगे हम। मोहम्मद के घराने से वफादारी करेंगे हम, अज़ा खाने सजाएंगे, अज़ादारी करेंगे हम। मोहम्मद के घराने से वफादारी करेंगे हम, अज़ा खाने सजाएंगे करेंगे। शरफ हमने ये पाया है, दुआए फातिमा है हम, तो जब तक जान बाकी है करेंगे शाह का मातम, तो जब तक जान बाकी है करेंगे शाह का मातम। जनाबे सैयदा से यूं मकखारी करेंगे हम, अज़ा खाने सजाएंगे, अज़ादारी करेंगे हम। मोहम्मद के घराने से वफादारी करेंगे हम, अज़ा खाने सजाएंगे, अज़ादारी बिछा कर फर्श मातम हमने दुनिया को बताया है, ये इज़्ज़त और ये दौलत शहवाला का सदका है, ये इज़्ज़त और ये दौलत शहवाला का सदका है। फ़िदा दौलत इन्हीं के नाम पर सारी करेंगे हम, अज़ा खाने सजाएंगे, अज़ादारी करेंगे हम। मोहम्मद के घराने से वफादारी करेंगे हम, अज़ा खाने सजाएंगे, जुलूसों में जरी अब्बास का परचम उठाएंगे, वह हम नामे सकीना पर सबीले भी लगाएंगे, वह हम नामे सकीना पर सबीले भी लगाएंगे। मुकम्मल माह गम की ऐसे तैयारी करेंगे हम, अज़ा खाने सजाएंगे, अज़ादारी करेंगे हम। मोहम्मद के घराने से वफादारी करेंगे हम, अज़ा खाने सजाएंगे, अज़ादारी। जो ज़हरा से किया हमने वो वादा निभाएंगे, जहाँ जाएंगे गाजी का वहन परचम लगाएंगे, जहाँ जाएंगे गाजी का वहन परचम लगाएंगे। हुसैनी काफ़िले की अब अलमदारी करेंगे हम, अज़ा खाने सजाएंगे, अज़ादारी करेंगे हम। मोहम्मद के घराने से वफादारी करेंगे हम, अज़ा खाने सजाएंगे, अज़ादारी। आज़ादारी के सदक़े में हमें मौला बुलाएंगे, सकीना का दरे शबीर पे नोहा सुनाएंगे, सकीना का दरे शबीर पे नोहा सुनाएंगे। यकीनन रोज़े सरवर की ज़वारी करेंगे हम, अज़ा खाने सजाएंगे, अज़ादारी करेंगे हम। मोहम्मद के घराने से वफादारी करेंगे हम, अज़ा खाने सजाएंगे, अज़ादारी करेंगे हम। मोहम्मद के घराने से वफादारी करेंगे हम, अज़ा खाने सजाएंगे, अज़ादारी करेंगे हम। सूरत मुबारकतुल फातिहा।
السلام عليك يا رسول الله، السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين والسيد الوسيم، السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين، السلام عليك يا خديجة الكبرى، السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى، السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله الحسين، وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك وناخت برحلك. عليكم مني جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعل الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين وعلى أخيك أبو الفضل العباس بن أمير المؤمنين وأختك زينب وأم كلثوم وبنتك السكينة جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليكم يا أئمة المسلمين، علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا حجة الله يا ابن الحسن يا صاحب الزمان سيدي الأمان 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 من فتنة الزمان. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن، السلام عليك يا كعبة الإيمان، السلام عليك إمام الإنس والجان، أجل الله لك ما وعدك من الناس وظهور العام ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك توعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا.